Hello and welcome to West Virginia Author. I'm your host, Lynn Squires. Today we have sort of a special treat. We have 4 guests. Our tiny stage holds 2 at a time, so we're going to be switching off. But the 4 guests are Cheryl Denise, who grew up in Elmira, Ontario, but now hails from Shepherd's Field near Philippi. Susanna Connolly Holstein lives in Jackson County. Kirk Judd resides in Morgantown. Sherelle Runyon Wiggall, originally from Roane County, now lives in Wood County. These 4 poets came together and wrote a book of poetry entitled Porch Poems. Where is this porch and how did this come together? Welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to get these answers from you guys today. How long, first I should tell everybody that you all met together for quite a while and this is a project that came out of group writing. So how long have you all been meeting to write together?
We started back, I think it was in May of 2016, and we, I'm just trying to think. At Kirk's camp in Buckeye, West Virginia, and I met you, the 3 of you, at West Virginia Writers, and that's how we became friends and started to know each other, and then we formed this group that got together at Poet Camp, and it went from there.
So we have a name for it, it's Poet Camp. How did the idea of a chapbook come about?
We had kind of kicked it around for a while, but it was really Kirk's idea. He said, we should pull together some of what we've been writing here and put together a chapbook. And that was, probably 2018 or 19. And we're like, yeah. And then, of course, pandemic. And so, yeah, but it was really his idea.
Is it just the 4 of you, or do you have other people that have floated in and out over time with the group?
It's pretty much been the 4 of us, hasn't it?
Just the 4 of us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The book I found very interesting when I read through it, and I don't think maybe I didn't read the foreword to start off with, but just launched right into it. But none of the poems have anybody's name attributed to them until the very end, and it tells who wrote what. And I've never met you before, Cheryl, but I know Susanna and Kirk, of course, and Sherelle, and I've read some of their work, so I tried to pick out who I thought wrote what, and I was not right very many times out of all that, but I thought, what an interesting way to set up a book, because you all, in a way, write very similarly. Did you all find that to be the case? Your work meshed real well like that?
It did. When you say we write similarly, I suppose in some ways we do. Our topics seem to be more rural, I think, more maybe earth-centered, and I know in some cases even a little more spiritual in some ways. Yeah, and I don't think we rubbed off on each other. I know in some cases that can happen with writers who meet a lot, but because we only got together once or twice a year, our styles didn't necessarily rub off on each other, but we all had input on each other's work as we were working on the pieces, so yeah.
So when this first started, though, you didn't go into it thinking we're going to have a book. We're just going to get together and work on some poetry together. Was this like a weekend adventure?
Yeah.
Everybody cooks one meal and that kind of a thing?
Right.
When you say you help each other with stuff, you just critiqued each other, or tell me about that a little bit.
So we'd each bring exercises to do over the weekend, and it was kind of all poetry all the time, except for when we cooked, and in the evening when we'd have a campfire and sit outside. So we'd do these exercises and all write at the same time, and I think there was this energy that would flow off of each other, or there were poems that I wrote that I know I wouldn't have written without the energy and without the instructions that came, with this group. And then so sometimes I think some of our poems, they kind of overlap in the feel or the structure because they came from the same exercise. And I know I sometimes read the book and I forget who wrote that poem. Was it Susanna or was it Sherelle? Or, and I'll go back to the back and it's like, oh yeah, that's Susanna's, So I love when people say that to me, I was trying to guess who wrote what in it, and yeah.
Well, I've read plenty of books in my day, and I've never read one like that where it's really left to your imagination basically until you get to the rear end of it. And then as I was reading, I thought, I didn't cheat, I didn't go back and look, but I thought, I hope at some point they're going to tell me who wrote what. That would be nice. So the magic of writing together, how was that for you? And does that continue when you're not together, you think? Just memories of that?
It does, yeah, it does. But writing together, it pushes you. You know, I mean, it really did push me particularly to just try harder, to write better. And with, you know, with a lot of inspiration around, it was a lot easier to do that and to have their input, to find the right word. You know how sometimes as a writer, you're sitting there, you know there's a better word or there's a better phrase than what you've used, and you can't come up with it. And they throw suggestions to you, and you just, you know, write down all the suggestions, anything that sounded good. You'd write it down, and maybe you used it, maybe you didn't. It didn't hurt anybody's feelings. You know, if you didn't use it, and you could just do how you wanted, but it definitely was a motivator to write, being there.
I participate from time to time in morning writing groups on Zoom with people, which amazingly still brings a similar type of energy with it. But we usually write from prompts that can vary, different pictures or whatever. But give me an example of one of the exercises, one or two of the exercises you might have had.
Boy, can I remember any of them?
There was one that I remember, I think it was Sherelle that brought it, where we were supposed to write a blessing. And it could be any type of blessing, and she gave the exercises and gave examples of different kinds of blessings and read a few of them, and then we were just left to write a blessing. And then we each wrote for maybe a half hour, an hour, and then we would read what we wrote during that time and talk about it. Yeah. So that was one of the exercises.
And one I remember, we had a list of phrases, and we picked phrases and we wrote them all down. Then we would have to go back and cross out different parts of the phrases and then try to construct something with what we had left.
Sort of erasure poetry.
Yeah, a little bit like that, yeah. So that was intriguing. I think one of the ones I wrote actually came from that exercise.
I think that's a fascinating approach to a poem, to take something and magic marker out almost all of it till you arrive at
Right, and especially when there were phrases that were totally unrelated to each other, and you're like, how in the world am I going to make this work? But then it does.
I'd like to hear you all read some of your work. If one of you wants to go first there and give us a listen.
So this poem, this is a list poem, and it's a list of things that feed my soul. And it's called What Sustains Me. The long line of horse and buggies that clip-clop to church Sunday mornings sound like tree frogs on the hillside. Red tails riding thermals while four poets on the porch prune their metaphors. Mom's bear hug and laughter when I was a girl, when I asked why Grandpa, normally happy, yelled when he preached, madly shaking his fist. The bright pom-poms tying the black shawls of old order women that one autumn when they were allowed a dollop of color, lime green, Macintosh red, orange, fuchsia, and turquoise. An old dog asleep in a sunbeam. The Indian tribe that says all creation stories are true. The bearded man who says many creation stories start with revenge, battles, and poison, but ours starts with a word, a breath. The Egyptian prof who buys a lamb to remember Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son. He chooses our best, binds the lamb's legs with electrical tape, gently heaves him into the trunk of his BMW. Early morning fog rolling off the pond. My husband, who turns the sanctuary into a wood shop. For Sunday worship, we build houses for barred owls. My 105-year-old grandma in her apartment singing hymns.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great visuals there. You have something you want to share with us too?
Sometimes we would bring work that we had already written to the group and go and revise and work through it with the group, which always made it better every time.
Every time.
Yeah, this is the keeper. There is a light in the window of the home place. No one notices. No one cares. No one sees the old one, keeper of mysteries, seer of the futures. No footsteps trace her path, but the cat raises his hackles, hisses wide-eyed at her passing shadow. She whispers secrets to red butterflies, knows the shrouds in heaven's basement, mysteries stored in the attics of hell. She sees where the dead walk, hears the singing of the yet unborn. Around her gate, sweet honeysuckle twines, lavender and bergamot, rue and cow's parsley mingle. Herbs for goodness, herbs for evil. Who can know what makes her tea? She keeps the kettle steaming on the fire, bread, butter, honey on her table, for company not yet devoured by death or life. Within her house of bones there beats a heart, patched with sinew, sown with gut. She listens to voices from murmuring graves. The sorrow of the world butters her bread. Over it all she pours sweet honey, tends the light.
That is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Heading in a little bit of a different direction now, I'd like to ask both of you, if you were giving advice to a younger writer, what would you say?
Just start. Don't wait for the muse to come. Just start. Invite the muse, but she's not going to come, and she's not going to come, but one of these days she's going to come if you just show up. That would be my best advice. And then to find other people that you trust, to share your work with, people you feel comfortable with, that can make a world of difference. Yeah.
I've always heard that the muse shows up when she finds you working.
Yes.
So I lived a lot of years waiting to be ready to do it. So now I know just sit down and crank something out. What would you tell somebody?
Say, trust yourself. Trust your voice. Write what you know. Write what comes from you. Write what's around you. Don't worry about what other people might think about what you write. Just write it.
Great advice. Thank you both for being here. This has been such a pleasure to have a poet group today. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back.
A spark ignites the imagination of a young 4-H member. As a teenager, he explores. As a young man, he experiments. As a scientist, he uses a new technology to detect an invisible tumor in a little girl's eye. The 4-H commitment of fostering 1 million new scientists and engineers is being embraced by companies and universities around the country. 4-H, 1 million new scientists, 1 million new ideas.
Welcome back to the show. Now we have two other guests with us today, Kirk Judd and Sherelle Wigal, and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for
Kirk's
having
Pleasure to be here.
an old-time visitor, and you're a new person, so I'm really thrilled both of you are here. We talked earlier with your other two co-writers of this wonderful chat book, and I was reading the blurb, one of the blurbs in the front, and David Prather, another wonderful West Virginia poet, wrote that the poems are tangled strands of DNA that make up every dweller in the state. That is such a beautiful way to describe this book, and because it does cover a multitude of thoughts and ideas and whatnot. And the poems we talked earlier about not being credited till the end, which I absolutely love that. I've never seen a book like that, and I tried to read and guess who wrote which one, and I didn't cheat to look back at the back. So I did also see at the beginning of the book, it says, maybe on the back, the book mentions that you four examine each other's skills. How does that work? In what way did you examine each other's skills?
Well, I think Cheryl said earlier, it was all poetry all the time. And even when we were cooking and eating and sitting around the campfire, we were talking about poetry. And all of us have known each other for a while. We all trusted each other enough to have each other tell us the truth, when something worked, when it doesn't work. And so I think by getting that immediate feedback, it makes you a little sharper as a writer, because you know what works right when you're doing it, instead of waiting to publish it or lay it out to an audience. So you become a little more skillful right off the bat, having that immediate feedback.
That's wonderful. I've been in so many writing groups where one or more people don't take criticism very well, even though it's meant in the very best way. So that's tremendous to have that with all of you all, synergy with what's going on there. It also said you give each other sharp, insightful input. Many writers I've found dismiss that if it conflicts at all with how they think things should be. So did you ever have conflict with what somebody else said, and how did you work through that?
I don't know that we had any real conflict. I think, as Kirk said, we all trust each other and we trust ourselves. So if somebody offered a suggestion, I won't say criticism, I'll say critique, which sounds gentler, we knew enough whether we trusted our own writing enough and the other people to weigh it and consider if we wanted to make the suggestions or not. Changes. Yeah.
Everybody should do that.
Right.
I'm in favor of that. Do you want to read a poem for us that you wrote from there?
Yes, I'll do Last Night the Mockingbird. Last night the mockingbird, and now black-capped chickadee, brown thrasher, dove, all those glorious birds of dawn. Here is rabbit, gray squirrel. Towhee demands attention. Drink your tea as steam rises from blue mugs. Across green meadow on a hollow tree, red-bellied woodpecker rat-a-tats his territorial drumming. Along the Greenbrier River, wood ducks fly upstream, Canada geese down. What more can we say about this morning that hasn't already been said by riotous fence-line forsythia as it shouts yellow hallelujahs into the blossom of light?
Wonderful. That certainly pegs what it's like to live in West Virginia and how in touch you are with nature.
And we have the forsythia on the cover
Yes,
of the book.
you do. We know what time of year this was taken. You still are meeting together, or we're done now that we have a book? Or
Oh no, we're not done. We're talked about. Cheryl rode down with me today, and we talked about when we're going to get back together, and it's generally in the spring or in the fall. So probably be this spring we'll have another. We've got lots of material. This is just some of the material.
I'm sure.
And may I say something?
Sure.
One of the things, and Kirk, that we talked about putting this together is to show people that writing exercises work if you approach them in the right way. People go to workshops and say, oh, I never get anything. Well, you can get one line and go on with it. So that's
agree
what
with
we
that.
wanted to point out, that, these were exercise driven.
Well, this is just a wonder. I've never read a book that I'm aware of that was written by 4 different people. It was quite engaging, and it was fun trying to figure out whose voice am I actually listening to here. And I was telling them earlier, I can't tell really if I guessed anybody, it was just happenstance that I figured it out, I think.
What a great compliment.
If somebody that you know is wanting to try something similar, obviously you all are not going to bring in 4 other people with you, but what would be your advice how to start up something like that, and what kind of ground rules to go by?
Well, I'll just so happen to mention that I'm teaching a workshop in Pennsylvania in March on collaborative writing, which brings in some of that. I think what you do is you first find a voice that's similar, or someone else's work that you admire or would like to work with, and just sit down and start the conversation. I think, like Sherelle does, that exercises are a great way to do that, and if you can do exercises together, then you can find that common ground, a common feel or a common sound that you can then roll up into a collaboration like a whole book, a whole chapbook.
So you think meeting twice a year is sufficient, or and then initially would you suggest more than that, or did you all meet more than that?
I would say initially for somebody just starting, if you don't know each other, I would do several, before you commit yourself to a whole weekend, do several small things in groups more frequently to get a feel for each other and whether you trust each other. You know, we have known each other longer than we want to admit. So we already had that trust over the years.
Yeah, but I would say for this type of thing and where we all are in our work, once or twice a year is plenty, because that would give me maybe time to work on something between spring and fall to have it ready enough to bring back in the fall. Because for me, anyway, writing a poem is a lot of work. And not that I don't enjoy it, it's just that it takes a lot.
Right.
And a lot of time. And like Cheryl said, we all trust each other anyway, so that in-between time, we may be working on other things, but we may be working on some of these to make it better for the next time we meet. So for me, once or twice a year is right.
I know I write prose mostly, and every word to me is important, but I'm writing a lot more words than you all are. So in poetry, which I write occasionally and not real well, you really have to make every word count. And I think a lot of people think poetry is something you just dash out and go on, but every poet I've had on the show pretty much hammers home that this is a process, and you know, you might agonize over a sentence for a week or two.
You agonize over the space between the words.
The words, the punctuation, the line
Or
break.
no punctuation, comma or no comma. Who was it that said you work for hours deciding to take a comma out and then another few hours deciding to put it back in?
And then you throw the whole sentence away.
Yeah,
So it
and I
didn't
think
matter.
people don't really get that, but that really is, I think, an accurate representation of how that works. Advice to young writers. Well, let's have you read something first here.
Okay.
I saved you for last. You said to me the last time you were on that poetry was to be read out loud, that
Oh, it
was
is.
really how it is. And I've said that to several other people who have been on the show since then, but that's just so true. It's reading it's one thing, but hearing it is just, ta-da, wonderful.
I agree. Thank you for saying that. I fought that fight for a long time. This is titled, Things You Can Only See If You're Not Looking. A lark's condensed breath as it sings a too cool morning into day. The star next to the star you think is Alnilam, sparkling in the hunter's belt low in the November sky. Your lover's hand reaching just before it touches your shoulder. Ghost cats. The infinite grace of the first raindrop. Green knowing it will be yellow in February for Scythia. Owls at night. Mars winking, Jupiter too, and Saturn, Venus with both eyes. The corpses smile just before you pass. The tear you never cried. The last pin oak leaf as it falls. The sound wave it makes. Squirrels in a beech grove. The bend in the tail of that comet. The animal no one has ever seen. Sleep. The first purple red bud. The rise of trout downstream from your cast. Cedar waxwings eating the last cherries. The color of the devil's eye. Your mother's last breath. The spirit rising from everything, from you, from the river, from the grass blade and the elk, from the sentient wolf and sheep in the pasture, from hay in the field, from peaches in the orchard, from turtles in the pond, the swell and pull of it all, lifting, lifting, lifting.
Phenomenal. Yes, that was so good. Just the amount of nature that is in all of your all's work, I love that. I mean, you're observant. You're not just seeing a tree. It's like you're seeing things.
We must live an examined life.
Yes, exactly.
In Maggie Anderson's comment for the book, she said that all of us have an important relationship with the environment, which I thought was a excellent way of putting it.
Yes.
Because where we were in that part of West Virginia is you're in it. You're deep in it, and you can't help but notice all of it and how important it is.
My husband and I spent time this past summer a couple different times at a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and life is different when you're doing that. It doesn't matter if you're going away for a few days or a weekend or a week or whatever, but it's a different life for sure, and certainly lends itself to wanting to write about it. So reflected in all of your all's work in this little volume. I mean, packs a powerful punch.
Thank you.
Good job. Last and not least, I wanted to ask you all, what would you tell young writers?
First, I would say read, and then read again, and then read again, and don't stop reading. But as you're reading, put that poem in your mouth. Say those words out loud. That's how poetry started. But I think reading is the most important to get you started, because you get then a feel for rhythm and cadence. And you may try to copy somebody, but in the end you won't do that. But I think reading opens so many doors, and read the poem out loud to yourself.
It really, you can hear how words work together, or more importantly, how they don't work together
Exactly.
necessarily.
I would add to that, go listen to poets. And I mean, not only say it in your voice, but go listen to other poets. Go to poetry readings, hear what other people are doing, and listen to all performers, stand-up comics or ballad singers, to get your timing down, to see how they interpret the way the words are put together. So go experience poetry in that way.
I always think it's interesting reading free verse, because in my mind I'm thinking, how do they decide where to stop that line and move on if it's not no period? They're like, what made them decide to chop that in half and move that to the next thing? But when you hear it, you get it. You understand that. Any other advice for young writers?
Expose yourself to any artist, any kind of artist. Writing isn't alone art, but you feed off the energy of any of the other arts.
I know a lot of people are writing ekphrastic poetry. I hope I got that word right. But I think that's a wonderful thing to see visual art that you may not look at otherwise,
Right.
and then see what comes to you from that.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you guys so much, all four of you, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Where can we find this besides Amazon?
Sheila Nagig Editions.
Okay.
You can go to their website. We have a page on there. You
Okay.
can order it directly from the publisher.
Well, it's lovely.
And all of us usually have a dozen or so copies in our cars when we travel.
We'll just track you
Just in
down.
case you run into us anywhere.
If we see you at McDonald's, that's where we could get one. Thank you again, and I hope you write more and we'll have you back again.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.